In the howling fury of a midnight blizzard, old Jack Harlan, a forgotten Vietnam vet with frostbitten hands and a heart heavier than his purple heart, cracked open his creaking cabin door. There, silhouetted against the swirling snow, stood 20 leather-clad bikers, exhausted, shivering strangers on roaring machines that had sputtered to silence miles from nowhere, begging for shelter from the storm that threatened to bury them alive. With nothing but a flickering lantern and a pantry bare as his soul, Jack stepped aside, his voice a gravelly whisper. "Come in, boys. Ain't got much, but what's mine is yours." Jack Harlan had long since stopped counting the winters that clawed at his remote cabin in the Montana backwoods. At 78, he was a ghost in his own life. A single, solitary veteran whose medals gathered dust on a mantel beside faded photos of a wife and son lost to time and tragedy. Sarah had died 20 years ago from cancer, her final breaths echoing in the empty rooms they once filled with laughter. Their boy, Tommy, followed a decade later, killed in a senseless car wreck on some rain-slicked highway far from home. Grief had wrapped Jack like a shroud, turning him inward, away from the world that had chewed him up in Nam and spat him out broken. Poverty clung to him too. His veteran's pension barely covered the leaky roof and the canned beans that sustained him. Isolation was his armor, the cabin his fortress against a society that had forgotten men like him. That fateful night in December, the storm hit like a vengeful spirit. Wind screamed through the pines, rattling the windows as Jack huddled by the wood stove, nursing a mug of weak coffee. His arthritis throbbed, a constant reminder of shrapnel still lodged in his leg, but he ignored it, staring into the flames that danced like the ghosts of his past. A thunderous rumble pierced the gale, not thunder, but engines, faltering and desperate. Then, a pounding at the door, frantic and raw. Jack hesitated, his hand on the latch. Strangers in these woods meant trouble, poachers, drifters, or worse. But the plea that cut through the door was human, vulnerable. "Mister, please, we're freezing out here." Compassion stirred in him, unbidden, like a spark in dry tinder. He remembered the jungles, the fear in young soldiers' eyes, the unbreakable code of looking out for your own. With a deep breath, he flung the door wide. 20 bikers tumbled in, a motley crew of hardened men stamped with the ink of the road, tattoos of skulls, eagles, and lost love snaking up their arms. They were the Iron Wolves, a small outlaw club riding cross-country for a rally, caught off guard by the freak blizzard. Led by grizzled Rex, a bear of a man with a scarred face and eyes like chipped flint, they shook snow from their leathers, steam rising as they warmed by the fire. "Didn't mean to barge in," Rex grunted, his voice thick with relief. "Roads are gone. Bikes are iced over. We'd be popsicles without you." Jack waved it off, masking the pang in his chest. His cabin was no palace, just a one-room shack with a sagging cot, a scarred table, and shelves lined with dog-eared war novels. But he had wood for the stove, a pot of stew simmering from his last venison hunt, and blankets patched from old army surplus. "Sit," he said simply, pulling out chairs that groaned under their weight. As the men settled, the tension eased into wary gratitude. They shared smokes, the acrid smoke mingling with the scent of pine and damp wool. Stories flowed like the whiskey one biker passed around, stolen from a saddlebag. Rex spoke first, his voice cracking as he admitted the club's fractures. Lost brothers to overdoses, prison stints, and the endless grind of the highway life that left them chasing freedom but finding only emptiness. "We ride hard, but it don't fill the holes," he confessed, glancing at Jack's medals. "You get that, old-timer? War leaves scars that don't heal." Jack nodded, the words unlocking something long sealed. He hadn't spoken of Nam in years, but here, in the glow of the fire, he let it spill. The ambushes, the buddies buried in foreign soil, the nightmares that still woke him sweating. The bikers listened, not with pity, but with the raw empathy of men who'd stared down their own demons. One, a lanky kid named Mikey with haunted eyes, shared his own grief. Abandoned by his family after a stint in juvie, the club his only kin. Poverty bound them all, bikes on their last legs, pockets empty from bad bets and worse luck. As the night deepened, Jack's small act of shelter wove them together. He portioned out the stew, thin but hot, and cracked open his last bottle of bourbon. Laughter broke through, tentative at first, then full-throated, as tales turned tall. Mikey fixed a loose shutter with tools from his pack, Another oiled the cabin door. For the first time in decades, Jack felt seen, not as a relic, but as a brother in arms. The storm raged on outside, but inside, hope flickered. By dawn, as the snow eased, the bikers prepared to leave, engines rumbling back to life. Rex clasped Jack's hand, slipping a silver wolf head ring into his palm. "You saved us tonight, Jack. Oh, you won." Jack watched them vanish into the white, a warmth blooming in his chest he thought lost forever. Little did he know, the road of kindness was just beginning its return journey. The days following the storm blurred into a quiet routine for Jack, but the cabin felt different, less like a tomb, more like a place where life had briefly paused to breathe. He turned the wolf ring over in his calloused fingers, a talisman against the loneliness that crept back with the melting snow. Poverty still gnawed. The pantry echoed empty, and a letter from the VA denied his latest claim for medical aid, citing insufficient documentation. Grief lingered too, sharper now that he'd tasted connection. Nights brought dreams of Sarah's smile and Tommy's laugh, mingled with the bikers' faces, rough but kind in their way. Isolation pressed in, but Jack found himself whistling an old tune as he chopped wood, the ring glinting on his hand. 2 weeks passed in solitude, the backwoods reclaiming their silence. Then, on a crisp afternoon, the rumble returned. Not 20 bikes, but a thunderous horde that shook the earth. Jack stepped onto his porch, heart pounding, as a sea of chrome and leather crested the hill. 500 strong, the Hells Angels, fierce, infamous guardians of the outlaw code, rolled to a halt, encircling his cabin like a living wall. Engines idled low, a respectful growl, as Rex dismounted first, Mikey at his side. "Jack," Rex called, striding forward with a grin that split his beard. "Told you we owed you." Jack's mouth went dry, surprise rooting him in place. These weren't just bikers, they were legends, whispered about in bars as both villains and saviors. Yet here they were, not in menace, but in homage. Rex explained it all. Mikey, it turned out, was the nephew of the Angels' president, a connection that turned a tale of shelter into a call to arms. Word had spread like wildfire through the network. Texts, calls, a viral post on some biker forum. "You opened your door to brothers in need," Rex said, his voice thick. "No questions, no judgment. That's the code we live by, but you showed it first." The Angels didn't come empty-handed. Trucks trailed the pack, unloading crates of groceries, fresh meats, canned goods, enough to stock Jack's shelves for a year. A crew of mechanics swarmed his ancient pickup, coaxing it back to life with parts scavenged from their own rides. Carpenters, tattooed and tough, patched his roof and reinforced the walls, turning the shack into a sturdy haven. One grizzled vet among them, a Korean War survivor named Hank, sat with Jack over coffee, sharing stories that bridged their wars. "We get it, brother," Hank said, clapping Jack's shoulder. "The world's moved on, but we ain't forgotten." As the sun dipped low, the transformation deepened. Mikey, eyes shining with unshed tears, confessed his own struggles, addiction's grip, the abandonment by a father who saw him as a failure. Jack's simple act had cracked his armor. Now, with the club's support, Mikey was checking into rehab, the first step toward reclaiming his life. Rex pulled Jack aside, revealing his own hidden grief, a daughter lost to the streets, mirroring Jack's losses. "Your kindness, it reminded us we're more than the road. We're family." In that moment, bonds forged in the storm solidified, hugs from strangers who felt like kin, laughter echoing as barbecues fired up on the frozen ground. But the full circle came at dusk, when the Angels gathered in a circle around the cabin, engines off, silence falling like a prayer. Rex stepped forward, presenting Jack with a custom jacket, leather etched with a wolf and a veteran's insignia. "You're one of us now," he declared. Jack, voice breaking, accepted it, the weight lifting from his shoulders. For the first time, he felt unalone, his grief softening into gratitude. The bikers revved up in unison, a salute that vibrated through his bones, before riding off into the twilight, leaving behind not just aid, but a lifeline. Jack stood on his porch long after, the cabin aglow with new life. Poverty's shadow receded, isolation shattered. His small act had rippled outward, changing not just his world, but a brotherhood's soul. In the quiet, he whispered thanks to the stars, to Sarah, to Tommy, to the strangers who'd become saviors. In a world hardened by loss and indifference, one act of unwavering kindness can summon an army of humanity, proving that compassion is the unbreakable thread weaving us all together. Moral of the story: a single spark of generosity in the darkest night can ignite a wildfire of brotherhood, transforming isolation into unbreakable bonds of empathy and love.